Buenos dias. Good morning to everyone joining us. I hope you are hanging in there, staying positive and focusing on what you can control. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you have your cafecito ready to go. My name is Patricia Mota, and I'm currently serving as President and CEO for the Hispanic Alliance for Career Enhancement, a national nonprofit organization whose mission is to positively impact the workplace and providing the insight, access, and professional development to Latinos, both aspiring and current Latino professionals across the country. Happy Black History Month, and sending all of our love and our regards to our friends and family and community members, the Asian American and Pacific Islanders, and our Texans who are experiencing some tough times and tough weather last week. This year, our theme for ASE is that we lead at the intersection of identity, equity, and unity. You'll see that throughout our conversations, our cafecitos, and our events throughout the year. And today, our special guest is Josy Laza Gallagher. Buenos días, Josy, ¿cómo estás?
Buenos días, estoy aquí con mi cafecito.
Con tu cafecito. Josy is a diversity and inclusion consultant and executive coach. She also serves as one of our board of directors for the national board at ASE, and has also been actively involved with our leadership programs, such as our Mujeres de ASE, where she leads as a trainer for one of our training sessions for that program. So Josy, it's a pleasure to have you joining us today with our Cafecito con ASE. Can you tell us, how do you prefer your cafecito?
So I prefer my cafecito, which is a cappuccino, and with an espresso. And I use Nespresso, but I just found Bustelo capsules that I could use in my Nespresso coffee. So that's what I'm having today.
Wow, I didn't know they had capsules. That's good to know. Bustelo is one of my favorites.
I found it. So I have my Bustelo in my Nespresso cappuccino.
Oh, that sounds amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that, Josy. So one of the things, we have our listeners tuning in, and those of you tuning in, please get your questions ready. Feel free to share your comments with Josy as well. But one of the things we like to share, the background, so giving visibility to the various Latino professionals that we work with to our network. So can you share, Josy, in terms of your career, your professional background, but also your cultural background with us?
Yes. And you know how much I love this topic, because I always think that the more I'm there with you, the more I can represent. So my background is I'm Afro-Cubana. Both my parents were born in Cuba. I was born in the United States, but I did something very different from most Cubans. I went back to Cuba when I was 6 months, was raised there till I was 5, and then I came to New York City. So I've always had those, one foot in one place and the other foot in the other place. And actually, I think it's enriching having the two cultures. So consider myself very Cubana, because even when I was in New York, once I went into my house, it was all Cuban food, Cuban music. And then when I had to leave my house, I lived in a mostly Irish American neighborhood, so I had to, what we now call code switching, or I had to flex my style to be able to belong. So very much in love with my both Cuban and African roots, and have been raised in both, really. So that's my my ethnic background. I've worked in corporate for the first, I would say, 20 years of my life in Fortune 500 organizations, both in the U.S. and outside of the U.S. So I've worked for a company that some of you are too young to remember, Union Carbide, but then Hewlett Packard and Scholastic. And then I moved to Switzerland, and then I lived in Switzerland for 9 years and worked for HP and Digital when I was there. Then I moved back. So I've had a pretty eclectic career. Mostly I started in human resources and organizational development, and then started working in this space when we started with sexual harassment and diversity. So I am now a consultant. I work for different, I say D&I boutiques, as well as do some of my own work. So there you go.
Thank you for sharing that background. I know, Josy, from our various conversations, you have a wealth of knowledge, and we're getting some love in terms of celebrating mixed racial ethnic background. Thank you, Paul, for that comment. And we're going to touch on that a little bit more because I think it's important to share our own stories and how we identify and our experience with that. And one of the things that ASA does every year is we come up with a theme. And this year, it's We Lead at the Intersection of Identity, Equity, and Unity. Josy, we've talked a little bit about it. For you, what does that mean?
Well, I think just being an Afro-Latina, and you'll see me use my titles interchangeably. Sometimes I wake up as Afro-Cubana, sometimes Afro-Latina. But it's given me...
What are you today, right now?
Yeah, I'm Afro-Cubana right now, but it's given me a quadro consciousness because I'm simultaneously Black, I'm Latina, I'm a woman, actually even quintuple because I'm a mother and I'm a first-generation American. So I'm always very conscious of that intersectionality that you were talking about and how that shapes my values and shapes my perspectives. I talk about it really shapes the lenses through which I see others, and really it helps me with the boundaries when I'm in the workplace in a leadership position and in my coaching. So I always have that in my lens. So this is a very good topic for us to be thinking about in terms of how do I show up, and when we think about how we show up, we also have to be aware of how others see us, right? So that we have our own identity, and then others might have identity about who we are, and then always trying to manage that and to be authentic and true to yourself. So, that's how I see what this topic that you're talking about. It's,
for sure. And I think, and just to build on it, right? It's that, and then the added layer is with the equity pieces, understanding how these intersectional identities have either, and I think this is the key part, because the intersectionality is something that was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, right? That discusses on how these identities either further oppress or further create opportunities for us as individuals. And this could be in the workplace, in the education system, and so many layers, which then builds on the equity piece. Like, how are we ensuring as individuals, as employers, that we're building equitable workplaces and environments? And just to build on that, it is Black History Month, and I think one of the intersectional identities that our Latino community that you identify with is the Afro-Latino community, the Black community that's also part of the Latino community, right? So that being said, as a Black and Latina in the workplace, you wrote actually 2 years ago, when we were talking about intersectionality, a blog, and it was titled, for us, it was titled, "You Don't Look Latina." And that was, started off with your experience. Can you share a little bit more about that, and what is corporate America doing, in your opinion, when it comes to this piece and ensuring that they're building inclusive workplaces?
Yeah, so I wrote that blog, and it's still very relevant in terms of how I show up, and you don't look Latina. So I think the media has a lot to do with how people see us, Latinas. And I don't fit that mold, and it has to do with who we see on TV and who we see in our magazines. I have to say, because for the most part it's been white or light-skinned Latinos, but I have to say there has been some progress, because I know that's one of the last questions we were going to talk about. What am I positive about? I have seen some progress in seeing more people who look like me on the screen. We have Gina Torres, we have so there are some people out there, but for the most part, it still happens to me when I'm doing workshops, that when I then talk about being Latina, there's a surprise, and if I speak Spanish, there's a surprise. So sometimes it's a surprise from our own community. So I think there's a lot of work to be done in that space. Latinos also have to acknowledge and embrace the Blackness that we have in our group, as well as, of course, in the white community. So I think from a corporate perspective, there's very many times in the past where I would walk in, I'd be the only one of of those dimensions, right? Only one woman, only one Black, and that still happens. Even though I see some progress, I think all the violence that happened last year actually brought to mind a lot of leaders understanding and awareness of what needed to be done. So what I'm seeing now, certainly in my area, more Black folks being promoted, put in positions of leadership. So I'm seeing that more often. With Biden's government, I'm seeing also that. So that's hopeful. We still have a lot of work to do, because I think from a systemic point of view, we still are not addressing inclusion and diversity and inclusion and equity from a systemic point that does touch on the intersectionality. So how are organizations supporting me, what I need to succeed, and looking at my specific needs, and that's the equity piece. Yep. To understand, am I coming with what everybody else has, or am I needing some special resources? So I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does, and I think that's imperative. I think for us, as we're continuing to discuss on this topic, it's important that not only employers are taking action and looking at the structural piece, right? Because that's where change is really going to happen. But also where individuals like that Latina, that Latinx, person that identifies as Latinx or Afro-Latino, within these organizations, like what advice do we have for them? Like what actions can they take to ensure that not only are they advocating for themselves, but advocating for others within the workspace as well? So that's my question for you, Josy. But those of you tuning in, if you have a question or comment, please feel free to share so that we can ensure we get to you. So Josy, if you can answer that, and then I'll go to our LinkedIn comment here.
Yeah, I mean, I think for as I mentioned before, I think the Floyd protests and everything that was happening has mobilized Latinos to confront racism and anti-Blackness within our own community. So I think that's important. The challenge is to continue to be constant around racial equity. And then to that point, what can we do? I think if we are in those spaces, to make sure we bring it up, because sometimes I think it's blind spots. People aren't even aware. Yeah. So to ensure that, and we know that that's something that people are trying to do, the diverse talent representation, right? One of the things I always talk about is, where are you going to recruit? We know you can't go to the same places because we're going to bring back the same time. So to offer ideas, to be innovative of where can we be able to bring in that talent that looks more like me, and where to help. So if you're in an ERG in an organization, to be part of the folks who go out and market your organization, because it's really important that the people who you're trying to recruit look at people who look like them, to give them some hope that I too can succeed in the organization. So I think that's important. And I think the other piece is leadership accountability. So again, I've seen more leaders step up as a result of what we see, but we're beyond publishing statements. They all did that in the front. So that's great. So now we have to do the hard work, which is really to do the organizational assessment. Where are we? Where are the gaps? And for leadership to be held accountable of doing something around that. And then I think to create a culture where it's okay to talk about the micro, even macro aggressions that happen in the organization. So again, those are leaders and everyone else in the organization, to create that culture where it's okay. I just finished doing an organizational assessment with focus groups, and I'm still hearing we're afraid to speak up. If we speak up, we're being, penalized. So it's really important to be able to speak up, and also when you see microaggressions happening, to acknowledge that, and to like zero tolerance type of
reaction. We need individuals to speak up, and the employers to provide the space. right? So that they feel comfortable speaking up as well. All excellent points. Thank you, Josy. And you also reminded me, because last year we also did a live webinar, which is available on the ASSET website on colorism on the Latino community, right? So we had a great panel, it was a town hall conversation, so that could be found on our resources tab on the ASSET website. And we have a LinkedIn user, how have you dealt with adversity related to race, gender, and ageism in the workforce? So talking about the work.
Yeah, and so that's like, from a systemic point of view, we're one, and I'm always encouraging folks that you might not be aware of the power that you have in just being yourself and speaking up. So I do not allow others to define who I am. I'm really comfortable in my own skin, and I show that. So I think that's part of what we need to do. I have had, for instance, sometimes I didn't even know it was happening to me. So I wish I would have benefited with some of the things that we're doing now, because I didn't have parents to help me understand that, because they didn't know. And so now what I do is just really show up as myself and try to educate, not humiliate, in helping people see how perhaps what they said or did landed on me, and then try to advocate and have my voice heard. And the other piece is to try to help others who do not have a voice, who are not in those spaces, to try to bring them in and let them have a voice. But I think the important thing is for you to be there and be able to bring it up, because sometimes they're not even aware that they're not, that if they don't know that person, and we all know that they know people who they feel comfortable with. So when you're in a calibration meeting, who gets brought up for promotions of the people there. So try to bring other people up, and then try to mentor and sponsor those who are not in those spaces, is how I've done that.
Nancy, I was just going to repeat that. Thank you. Educate, not humiliate. I think that's so critical, right? That be able to pull someone aside, have that one-on-one conversation, if it's in a larger group context, for example, is one way to ensure that you're doing it in a respectful manner and saying, hey, and then Olga, thank you, Olga, step up with courage.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, this work does require courage. This is what it requires. So we need to just say, and we want to help others, and then just feel strong about it, because we want others. When we talk about what do we need to do, is to help them feel comfortable in seeing, in my case, seeing color. It's okay to talk about it, but you have to set up that culture. And that's what I was saying before. The leader has to, and it starts with you. So you have to be vulnerable as the leader. You have to share things that perhaps weren't shared before, because that gives permission for other people to then be open about who they are.
There you go. It starts with you. So we have one more question from Hortensia. Thank you for the question. How do we get Latino representation into the D&I function? If you look at the newly D&I, maybe diversity officers, we haven't seen that many Hispanic Latino names. That's a great question. Josy, and a tough one too, right?
Yeah, and I love Hortensia, because actually, and I don't usually say this to people, that's my middle name.
What? I learned something new about you, Josy.
Yes, I don't use it, because a lot of people then say Hortensia instead of pronouncing it.
I'm sure she gets that all the time.
So how do we get it? I think it's true. You're right. I haven't seen as many, but I have seen some new Latino and Hispanic D&I folks up there. But I think it's for us to bring it up. I think it's, how do we get them to really identify them to people who might not know of them. So I know I've been doing that. And then to also talk to the person themselves to help them advocate for themselves, because I think some of us are still holding on to some of those cultural messages that we received about staying under the the radar and don't speak up so much. So I think those two things have to happen. But I would say be visible. Write blogs, get on social media, and then learn about who are the folks making decisions in your organization, and then have exploratory meetings with them, have a cafecito with them. Nothing that puts them on the spot, but just I want to learn a little bit more about how you do what you do.
Thank you, Josy. I know.
Okay.
So advocate. I know we're running out of time here, and I think those are all great tips. So it starts with you, right? We got to advocate. You got to ask the questions internally as well. Josy, my last question: what are you most hopeful for this year? I think you alluded to it earlier already.
Right. I'm hopeful because I see some inroads in even in the media in what we see. And then as I'm talking to clients, they have had an awakening, and they are, for the most part, truly wanting to bring in diverse talent, and they see the business rationale for it. I mean, we are a big population, and we saw that in the impact we had in the election. I think that opened up a lot of eyes that we can make a contribution, that we're going to be here. So why not leverage the talent? So that's what.
Gracias, Josy. So thank you so much, Josy, for joining us. I hope you all took away the several nuggets in terms of educate, not humiliate. Make sure we're speaking up and advocating for ourselves and for others. Mil gracias, Josy. Thank you to all of you joining on. Please share, continue to comment. And hasta la próxima. Gracias a todos.
Hasta la próxima. Que tengan buen día.
Igual.